All right, so up to our first speaker. So our first speaker flew in from Sydney, Australia, long way away, almost polar opposite of Helsinki. He's a life member of the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia. He was a crew member on the 12-meter Australia and the America's Cup. He's a co-founder of the youth sailing program, competing in eight Admiral's Cups. He's on the advisory committee of the Admiral Cup. Goes on and on. What we need to know is he sailed 31 Sydney Hobarts. He won it 5 times on line honors, 2 times overall, if I don't mistake. And he's here to tell us about the story of the Sydney to Hobart race. Peter Shipway.
All right. Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here, and I'm been made very welcome, and it's a real honour, so I hope you'll enjoy this. I've got to fit 80 years into 25 minutes, so bear with me. Okay, let's get rolling. The Sydney to Hobart, starting in Sydney Harbour the day after Christmas, the yachts head into the Tasman Sea for the 628 nautical mile run down the southeast coast of the continent. The start attracts hundreds of thousands of spectators on the water and around the natural amphitheatre of the harbour and watching the nationwide broadcast on television. The yachts cross the notoriously treacherous Bass Strait, where currents run raging west to east from the Indian and Southern Oceans, funnel through the narrow, shallow Struan Strait between the Australian mainland and the island of Tasmania. In a good year, a northeasterly wind can create a record-breaking run to Tasman Island, where the yachts turn right at the huge 300-metre high sentinel that is Tasman Island, at the entrance of the appropriately named Storm Bay, then takes them towards the finish, the Derwent River, right in the heart of Hobart. Hobart, founded in 1804, is the second oldest city in Australia behind Sydney. It was founded as a penal settlement for convicts sent from Great Britain and is, of course, the birthplace of Queen Mary of Denmark. In a bad year, the Southern Ocean can smash the fleet with an Antarctic gale as it did in 1998, the deadliest in the event's history. 6 sailors lost their lives. Only 44 of the 115 starters finished. 5 boats sank. A Bass Strait bomb, a supercell, devastated and demolished the fleet on the second and third days, with hurricane-force winds gusting up to 90 knots and monstrous, steep-breaking, chaotic seas of 30 metres. In what was the largest peacetime search and rescue effort in Australian history, over 50 sailors were rescued by other competitors, commercial vessels and helicopters. Overall, the rescue efforts involved 35 military and civilian aircraft and, incredibly, 27 Royal Australian naval vessels. The race was won by one of the smallest yachts, 35-foot Midnight Rambler, while Sayonara, seen here, Bruce Farr designed maxi, owned and skippered by Larry Ellison, was first to finish. On arrival, Ellison declared, "Never again." The first race, which began on Boxing Day, 1945, was something of a post-World War II wind-down. Royal Navy Chief Engineer Captain John Illingworth, stationed in Sydney with the Royal Australian Navy's fleet, which with US forces had been holding off the Japanese in the Pacific, was a past Commodore of the Royal Ocean Racing Club and was an outstanding ocean racing yachtsman in England prior to the war. Over a dinner in Sydney in May 1945, at which he was to talk about his yachting experiences, one of the guests mentioned a planned cruise to Hobart. Illingworth was invited to join. Famously, Illingworth said, "No, but if you make a race of it, I will come." The Cruising Yacht Club of Australia, based in Sydney, which was established a year earlier, ran the race and has every year since, except 2020, when it was cancelled because of COVID. 9 yachts crossed the starting line in that first race and 8 finished. Captain Illingworth acquired a 34-foot double-ended sloop designed and built in Australia. He said it represented a brilliant design with a very easily driven hull, and he renamed her Rani. She was the smallest yacht in the race. As was to so often happen, the weather turned on the second day of the race, and the fleet battled a force 9 southerly gale and wild seas, with waves up to 20 metres high across Bass Strait. The storm lasted for 36 hours, and all the yachts hove to or sheltered, except for Rani, who battled on. Her mainsail ripped, but was repaired by one of the crew. She was leaking badly, and water below decks floated the labels off bottles and tins, consequently choking the bilge pumps and leaving no clues at the contents of the food containers. On the third day out, the alarm was raised when race officials and the RAAF, the Royal Australian Air Force, were unable to make contact or locate Rani. Rani had disappeared. Even the RAAF Catalina sent to track the boats were unable to find her. She was presumed lost, and most thought in hindsight it had been a mistake just to let such a relatively small yacht join the race. The newspaper headlines screamed, "Yachts lost," and the media were having a field day about the missing yachts. An RAAF Catalina eventually spotted Rani in Storm Bay on New Year's Day, just 20 miles from the finish, and unknown to the crew, miles ahead of the opposition. As they moved up the Derwent and came closer to Hobart, messages began to be flashed in Morse code using car headlights to ascertain that it was Rani and she was safe. A small vessel approached carrying New Year's revellers, and Illingworth shouted across, "How are we doing?" With that, there was much laughter from the small launch, and Rani's crew morale fell, as with no radio communication, they had no idea how they were going. There was disbelief aboard Rani when Illingworth asked further, "How many boats are in?" There was more laughter. Then came the reply, "You are first." The crew could not believe it. Someone else yelled across, "Are you a dry ship?" "Yes," they said. Then the launch closed in and a bottle of whiskey was passed across. They crossed the line and berthed to a hero's welcome at Constitution Dock at the centre of Hobart. Rani took both line and handicap honours in 6 days and 4 hours, arriving on the 1st of January 1946, and history was made. She remains all these years later as the smallest yacht ever to win line honours. Here's Illingworth and his victorious crew. Illingworth returned to England shortly after and went on to win both the 1947 and 1949 Fastnet races with his Myth of Malham. Rani was subsequently wrecked off the north of Sydney a few years later, so a significant piece of Australia's maritime history was lost forever. Second to finish in the first race was Winston Churchill, which some 53 years later tragically sank in the aforementioned disastrous 1998 race. 3 of her crew members drowned after their life raft failed in treacherous conditions, and the rest of the crew endured 28 hours in the water before being rescued by helicopter late on the third day. This is Winston Churchill on the afternoon of the race she sank. 24 hours later, she was gone. Competition in that first race was certainly not as fierce as it is today. One of the contestants sheltered from the blow behind Montague Island off the southeastern tip of Australia before entering Bass Strait, and the crew went ashore shooting a few rabbits, which they had for dinner that night while still at anchor. They resumed racing some 30 hours later. It was that sort of race. The only yacht to retire that year was Archina, now beautifully restored and sailing in the classic regattas on Sydney Hobart. The last yacht to finish in that inaugural year was Wayfarer, taking an incredible 11 days and 6 hours, which is still the slowest time in the race's history. 19 boats started in the second race, but only 11 finished. The magnificent Mourner, seen here, took the first of her 7 line honours. She was a 66-foot William Fyfe designed cutter built in Sydney for preeminent surgeon Alexander McCormick, later Sir Alexander, launched in 1913. She won again a year later, setting a new race record of 4 days and 5 hours. Mourner's record stood for 3 years when the beautiful Margaret Rintoul, a 44-foot yawl designed by Philip Rhodes from the United States, cut it by 2 hours and 32 minutes. This is Margaret Rintoul racing today. This photo was taken while racing across Sydney Heads in a recent Sydney Hobart Classic Regatta. It won photographer Andrea Francolini the Water Sports World Photo Award in the Classic Yacht category in 2024. Mourner was later owned by the eccentric sheep farming bachelor brothers Frank and John Livingston, who renamed her Kurrawa 4 and took her to 4 more line honours victories. Her record of 7 line honours in the Great Race lasted until 2014, when Wild Oats 11 took over the mantle. At the start of each Hobart race, John Livingston would stand in the bow playing the bagpipes, resuming his post at the finishing line and playing until Kurrawa 4 was berthed. The Livingstons later commissioned Scottish yard Alexander Robertson and Sons to build a David Boyd-designed Kurrawa 5, a 12-metre challenge for the 1964 America's Cup trials for Great Britain, but her near-sister ship Sovereign was selected. Hampered by poor performances, she was then sold on to the French plastics millionaire Baron Bic in 1973 to act as a trial horse in the first French America's Cup challenge. Now renamed Ikra, she is a feature in the classic yacht regattas in the Mediterranean. Mourner's original owner, also had another magnificent yacht designed and built in Scotland by the Fifes. Ada, a 72-foot schooner named after his wife and launched in 1924. In 1928, McCormick and 3 others sailed her from the United Kingdom to Sydney via the Panama Canal. He sold her after the Japanese launched a midget submarine attack on shipping in Sydney Hobart in 1942, and she was resold after the war to an Australian yachtsman, Peter Warner, in 1960. Warner renamed her Astor after the household appliance company he owned and raced her in 4 successive Sydney Hobarts, 3 of which she was first to finish. She is now in American ownership in San Diego. The first yacht from Sparkman and Stevens, the American design team, ever to be built outside of the USA was Landfall, a 44-foot yawl entered the 1952 race, 17 years after she was launched in Tasmania. In her race debut, she battled for line honours, finishing just 26 minutes astern in second place. Olin Stevens was just 25 when he designed her. The race has always brought out the best in yacht design, seaworthiness, safety and speed, but the courage and ingenuity of those who compete has been an ongoing feature from the beginning. One of the standout examples of the amazing enterprise and innovation took place in the 1963 race. Lolita, a 35-foot sloop, as seen as she is here today, rolled 360 degrees in the extreme conditions and was in danger of foundering. Half full of water, the crew managed to lower the level within the cabin sufficiently enough to attempt to dry the saturated electrics by pouring their precious whiskey and rum ration over the motor and igniting the alcohol. Their mast had gone overboard, carrying with it their radio antenna, which was part of the backstay, and they were increasingly blown offshore, further away from Hobart and towards New Zealand. Their sailing master, an RAAF navigator and radio operator, managed to salvage 2 valves from the yacht's war surplus tank radio, and using the yacht's bronze life rails as an antenna, punched out a Morse code message giving their position. Fortune smiled and the message was picked up by a fisherman with a knowledge of Morse who passed it on. Incredibly, and you're not going to believe this, a Royal Navy submarine called HMS Trump. True story, was on exercises off Tasmania and picked up the message and sent to rescue Lolita. However, the Lolita crew had no idea whether the message had been received or whether they would be rescued, as they were rapidly running out of food and water. It was rumoured that the skipper in charge of the submarine had whispered to his second in charge, "Let's surface as close as possible and scare the shit out of them." As they approached, the last thing the stricken crew ever thought was the rescue would be by submarine travelling underwater. To the enormous surprise of the Lolita crew, there was this massive eruption in the calm sea, as though some prehistoric monster was arising, and the sub surfaced within 20 metres of their stricken vessel and towed her to safety. HMS Trump, there it is. I can't make it up. Yes, another first for the Sydney Hobart race. The race really took on an international flavour when the US shipping magnate Sumner, or Huey Long's 57-foot centreboard yawl Ondine took line honours in the 62 race and smashed the existing race record by 14 hours and beating the aforementioned Astor by just 60 seconds, the narrowest finishing margin in the history of the race. That's going up the Derwent River to the finish, Ondine just in front of Astor. Designed by American William Tripp Jr., she was the first ocean racing yacht constructed entirely of aluminium and tank tested at the Stevens Institute. Ondine had sailed 12,000 miles from the USA to compete. The race can be addictive, as Huey Long proved, returning 6 years later to take line honours with another Bill Tripp design, the 73-foot ketch Ondine II, with Ted Turner amongst the crew, along with a young Russell Long, son of owner Huey Long, seen here after the finish. They almost didn't make the start, being dismasted deep in the Southern Ocean en route to Sydney and having to make a frantic effort to get a replacement mast flown in, arriving just 2 days before the Boxing Day start. Yet again, they won line honours. He bought the same yacht back in '71 with less success, coming third across the line behind Kealoha. But Long's love affair with the race continued when he came back in 1974, returning with a new 80-foot Britain Chance design aluminium ketch Ondine III to take line honours once more, his third victory. Like a lot of Brit Chance designs, she was radical to say the least, with both towering masts the same height. A young Australian designer, Alan Payne, was starting to make an impact on the race. Alan, in fact, had sailed in the very first race as a 23-year-old as crewman aboard Horizon. His greatest ocean racing design was the Mighty Solo, arguably the country's finest ocean racing yacht during the 1950s. The 56-foot yawl, built in steel by her colourful owner, Vic Meyer, was almost unbeatable in Australian waters. Hard driven always by her owner and crew, she won 2 Hobart races outright and line honours twice and second to finish 4 times. Don't worry. The yawl built in steel, a later addition, as you might have seen, was a cowcatcher in the bow to give the foredeck crew some protection, as she was a submarine in heavy seas. I'm sure Alan Payne's name would be familiar to many as the designer of Sir Frank Packer's Gretel and Gretel II, Australia's 12-metre challenges for the 62 and 1970 America's Cups, respectively. Gretel, the first Australian 12-metre, became the first challenger to win a race against the Americans since 1934. The US yacht Weatherly won that series 4-1. Here is a great shot of Gretel surfing past Weatherly in that winning race. Gretel II also won a race in the 1970 challenge, but Intrepid, the US defender, prevailed 4-1. Gretel II was skippered by the internationally renowned Australian yachtsman Sir James, gentleman Jim Hardy. The Hardy's family's history in the Sydney Hobart is somewhat unique in so much as his father Tom built a 44-foot gaff cutter Nerida launched in 1933, designed by Scotsman Alfred Milne. Tom Hardy, a winemaker, was killed in an air crash in 1938 when Jim was just 7 years of age, and leaving the family without a leader, they sold Nerida. The new owner skippered her to victory in the 1950 Hobart Race. Many years later, when the Hardy wine label was well established, Sir James, in a nostalgic moment, purchased the vessel back, restored her to her former glory, and raced her in the 50th anniversary Hobart Race in 1994. Jim, who passed away 3 years ago, was knighted for his services to yachting and the community. She still races today, here she is, in the classic yacht regattas on Sydney Harbour. The international flavour of the Hobart Race continued with Stormvogel racing under the South African flag and getting the gun in 1965. Designed by Van der Stat for plywood mogul Cornelius Brunzeel, the 73-foot ketch is still racing competitively today, having competed in last year's Fastnet race, a race in which she won line honours in 1961. New Zealand's admirable record in the event began in 1966 when the pencil-thin 61-foot Fidelis, designed by Danish-born, German-trained Knud Riemers, took line honours with what still remains the second biggest winning margin in the history, over 17 hours. The following year, Another New Zealand entrant, the Sparkman and Stevens designed Rainbow 2, a 36-footer, one-tonner, skippered by Chris Bazade, raced to victory after holding a spinnaker down the east coast of Tasmania in a northwesterly gale after most yachts had reduced sail. Rainbow 2 gave New Zealand and Sparkman and Stevens its first overall handicap win in the race and put New Zealand firmly on the world ocean racing map. Rainbow 2 was the first overseas winner since the inaugural race, and Bazade subsequently went on to win the one-ton cup off Heligoland in Germany in 1969 with the same yacht. The same year that Rainbow 2 triumphed, another international yacht was the Line Honours winner, the radical 60-foot schooner Penduic 3, skippered by the legendary Eric Tabali. In the 1971 race, New Zealand incredibly made it a clean sweep of handicap honours, first, second and third with Pathfinder, Runaway and Waianawa. This is Pathfinder, another Sparkman and Stevens design, one-tonner built by a skipper, Bryn Wilson. Bazade was back in third place on Waianawa. The next year, 1972, was a watershed for the race when the converted 12-metre American Eagle, now skippered by the colourful Ted Turner, became the first yacht since the inaugural race to take line honours and handicap double. She was designed by Bill Luders for the 1964 America's Cup. Line honours in 1973 was taken by a real head turner, 72-foot ferro cement maxi, yes, ferro cement, named Helsel, colloquially referred to as the Flying Footpath, designed by an Australian, Joe Adams. Many thought she would sink before even getting out Sydney Heads, but the radically built sloop defied all the critics by sweeping to a new race record of 3 days and 1 hour. The party in Hobart Town was a humdinger with a cement mixer hired to keep the beer cold. Seal 3, a 40-foot sloop from Hong Kong, gave Ben Lexon the first of his only 2 handicap victories in the same race. Formerly known as Bob Miller and best known for the wing keel he designed for Australia too. Another famous yachtsman to have a strong affection for the race was the American Jim Kilroy, first coming in 1971 to win line honours in his 73-foot ketch Kealoha 2, again from the Sparkman and Stevens design team. Kealoha 2, now Australian-owned, is still racing actively and another to have raced in last year's Fastnet race. History was again created when Kilroy was back in 75 with a newly launched Kealoha 3, again from the Sparkman and Stevens, taking line honours and becoming the first yacht to break 3 days in the record time of 2 days and 14 hours, a record that stood for an unprecedented 21 years. Kealoha had a thrilling battle all the way with the mighty Alan Gurney-designed Windward Passage, in strong following northeasterly winds, winning by just 23 minutes. The 2 maxis were in sight of each other all the way as they surfed their way south to Hobart. 2 years later, both Kealoha 3 and Windward Passage were back for another round after a spectacular start in hard-running conditions. Kealoha was first to finish and became only the 3rd yacht in history to win line handicap doubles, and Passage was second. The late Sir Peter Blake, a New Zealand hero, took handicap and line honours double in 1980 with the Bruce Farr-designed Ceramco New Zealand. Blake returned in 1984 to take line honours with the Ron Holland-designed 78-footer Lion New Zealand. Both yachts were specifically built for the Whitbread Round the World race, and Blake used the Hobart as a warm-up event, as did Grant Dalton in 1992 with the Farr-designed maxi New Zealand Endeavour taking line honours. In the 80 years history of the race, New Zealand yachts have taken line honours 5 times and overall handicap honours 4 times. Runner-up to Ceramco was the Alan Payne-designed Gretel, the 12-metre, now converted to ocean racing after the America's Cup career was over. It was a spinnaker run all the way, and the Farr-designed Ceramco and Gretel thrived in the downhill conditions. With the exception of the very first Hobart race, the English had not really made an impression on the great race, but all that changed in 1969 when it was certainly Rule Britannia. Edward Heath, later to become Prime Minister of Great Britain, skippered the tiny SNS 34 Morning Cloud to overall victory. One of the smallest yachts to win, there's Heath and his crew. Tony Churchill on the left, the navigator. Some may remember Anthony Churchill. One of the smallest yachts ever to win, Morning Cloud weathered a tough punch across Bass Strait, and the victory was complemented by another English yacht, Crusade, the 64-foot Alan Gurney design. Skippered by Sir Max Aitken, later Lord Beaverbrook, the owner of the Daily and Sunday Express newspapers in the United Kingdom. Rupert Murdoch, the global mass communications figure, competed 6 times in the 60s with his own 54-foot ketch Alina, a John Alden design, which in one year came second across the line to Astor. Murdoch and his crew were infamous for their hijinks when they arrived each year in Hobart. On Huey Long's first visit in 1962, the Ilena crew notoriously arranged for a party aboard Long's Ondine without informing the owner. They had 1,000 invitations printed and delivered to waterside workers, nurses and the general public. They hired a Highland pipe band and invited the Governor of Tasmania and the Lord Mayor, who both arrived in full ceremonial dress. Well over 1,000 people turned up and enjoyed 20 18-gallon kegs of beer set up on the dock in front of and on board Ondine. To say Huey Long was gobsmacked would be an understatement. He was certainly not amused. Murdoch and his crew were suspended from the Cruising Yacht Club for 3 months and asked to write letters of apology to the Governor of Tasmania and the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania. The yachts, the crews, the designers and the builders have always been the real celebrities. One name that probably stands out above all others when it comes to the Hobart race in this context, and that is the Halvorsen brothers. The patriarch, Lars Halvorsen, arrived from Norway in 1924 via South Africa. The rest of the family followed. The Halvorsen brothers, seen here, Trigg and Magnus, became legends in the Australian yachts scene, sailing their own boats that not only had they built, but they had also designed. 5 times they won the great race, first with Solveig, after taking line honours with her in '53. Solveig competed in the 2021 Classic Regatta on Sydney Harbor. Next came Anitra 5, a 12-metre cutter designed by Trigg, and was overall winner in '57. Here she is racing today, still on Sydney Harbor in immaculate condition. Then the greatest of them all, Freya, the 37-foot sloop, winning 3 years in succession, 63, 64 and 65, a feat never to be repeated. One thing to design a yacht, another to build, and then another to sail it to victory 3 times in a row. They established a legacy of speed and seaworthiness that remains unmatched in the race's history. All their successful yachts were double-enders or canoe sterns, and Magnus Halvorsen, a magnificent old-school navigator, still holds the record for the most corrected time victories in the great race, 5 in total. The 1970s saw Sparkman and Stevens enjoy the spotlight with the history-making Love and War, the 47-foot sloop, winning the first of her 3 victories in 1974, repeating this in '78 and again in 2006. Love and War's record stands supreme today. Launched in '73, besides winning 3 times, she's been 3rd overall twice, 4th once, and divisional winner 8 times. Built under the old RORC rule, she has transcended this rule, incredibly finishing 3rd just 3 months ago as a 52-year veteran. She's won the veteran division in the 50th, 75th and 80th anniversary races, and the only modifications made in all that time has been the conversion of some, but not all winches to self-tailing. I was fortunate enough to be aboard for 2 of the victories, and our family was delighted just this last Boxing Day when our daughter Grace became the first female to race south in her crew and having the honour of steering Love and War across the finishing line in what was her first race to Hobart. Love and War here seen in the middle with the blue spinnaker, Fidelis on the left, and the refurbished 8-metre Defiance, which raced in 3 Hobarts on the right. Bruce Farr and his design office introduced winning lightweight yachts some 50 years ago and has dominated the race with an incredible 21 handicap victories. Bruce seen here on the left with Peter Blake and Peter Walker. The 1999 race saw the joint Australian-Danish entry, Nokia, become the first yacht to break 2 days for the 628 miles. She was built as Swedish match, a Bruce Farr design for the Whitbread 60 for the Whitbread Round the World race of 1997. The 2001, the Volvo Ocean race included the Sydney Hobart in their circumnavigation, with the Swedish entry, Assa Abloy, skippered by Neil MacDonald, taking line honours and leading the 8-yacht Volvo 60 fleet into Hobart. After a 3-hour stopover, they cast off on the next leg to Hobart. The previous year, Sweden also provided the line honours victor with the 80-foot Nicorette, skippered by the colourful Ludi Ingvall, well known, I'm sure, to a lot of Finnish yachtsmen. The official starter for the 2002 race was Sir Edmund Hillary, of course the first man to conquer Everest. The race entered its next iteration with the arrival of the Reichel Pugh-designed 100-footer Wild Oats 11 in 2004, setting records for line honours 9 times, 4 in a row, and on 2 occasions taking the treble with line and handicap honours and setting new race records. She has now been rebuilt to a 1K modifications with foils and renamed Palm Beach 11, and here she is seen after the Hobart race testing those foils out on Sydney Harbour. In 2014, a bold new competitor arrived on the scene to seriously challenge the supremacy of Wild Oats 11, Comanche. Comanche surged home in 2017, taking line honours with an yet unbeaten record of 1 day, 9 hours, at an average speed of just over 18 knots. Strangely, Comanche was not first to finish that year. Wild Oats 11 crossed the line, beating Comanche by 27 minutes, but was penalised 1 hour by the international jury for a rule infringement just outside Sydney Heads. Comanche has now secured that title on 5 separate occasions under 5 different owners or charterers. Some statistics over the years as I finish here. 7,830 yachts have started the race. 65,000 is the estimated crew that have competed. 31 yachts built before 1938 have competed. The largest fleet was in 1994 for the 50th anniversary race. 371 yachts started. Outside Australia, the USA has had the most line honours victories with 9. This is Constitution Dock, where the yachts tie up at the finish. The oldest skipper was the legendary Sid Fisher, at 88 years of age, a winner on both and handicap line honours. As I said yesterday, the softest part about Sid were his teeth. Close. He's passed on now, so God bless you, Sid. Closest finish for line honours was in 1982, when Condor beat Apollo by just 7 seconds. Smallest winning handicap winner was 9.2 metres or 30 feet, screw loose in 1979, a Ron Holland design. Each year has seen the race evolving. In recent years, there's been an introduction of double-handed division, which provided the outright winner for the first time in the most recent race, with foiling and other innovations which the Halversons and others could scarcely have dreamt of 81 years ago. The race will continue to evolve. But seamanship, seaworthiness and skills and wisdom acquired by hours of experience will always be the core and strength of those who battle the Tasman and to win one of the greatest of all ocean races, the Sydney Hobart. This race here is the little boat that I did my first 3 Hobart races on, 9.5 metres long, took me 145 hours. The last race I did to Hobart took me 44 hours on Wild Oats. But this little boat's still sailing on in Sydney Harbour, and looking back, I wouldn't have swapped it for anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. No worries. Yeah, it's quite tight. Hey, out of those 65,000 crew members or sailors, how many we have here in the audience? 1, 2, 3, 4. Quite nice. Quite nice. So you better change some stories with Peter. But thanks a lot for what a